I think this is always in the work that I make. How do you find an idea of freedom, like your idea in a life that you have, in the culture that you are in the society that you live in, but I suppose on your own terms? The characters in my films are never like rebellious. They're never like, I reject culture or I reject this, But they certainly don't necessarily choose just to follow a status quo.
Good morning, and welcome back to 5 a.m. Story Talk, a place to talk about stories in all their forms, the craft that goes into them, and the role that art plays in our lives. I'm your host, Cole Haddon, and my guest today is one of my favorite contemporary Australian filmmakers, Sophie Hyde, producer, TV creator, and director of documentaries, short films, and wonderful feature films such as 52 Tuesdays, Animals, and Good Luck to You, Leo Grande. We're going to discuss, amongst so many subjects, the narrative challenges she looks for in and even creates for each of her projects, the extensive effort that goes into finding the right tone for each of them. Our discussion of Leo Grande will be especially helpful to you in this regard, and the transgressive nature of her characters' search for their own definition of freedom. For my part, what I admire about Sophie's work is its constant structural inventiveness, how her films are very often dances between literary and commercial filmmaking instincts, and the in-your-face frankness of the sexual lives of her characters. For example, her debut film 52 Tuesdays, released in 2014, was shot over 52 Tuesdays, was largely unscripted, and evolved organically during the production and post-production. Animals, a 2019 coming-of-age film about two women trapped in arrested development, plays like an Evelyn Waugh take on the female sex comedy, featuring an especially brilliant performance by Holliday Grainger. And in Good Luck to You, Leo Grande from 2022, Emma Thompson plays a recently widowed woman looking to discover what she was missing in her sexually dull marriage by engaging a male sex worker played by Daryl McCormick. As I told Sophie in our pre-chat, as the son of two people miserably married for most of their relationship, I found Leo Grande heartbreaking, but also ultimately triumphant. I've seen it twice, and each time I bawled in the final act. Do yourself a favor and check it out if you haven't yet. All three of these films, including Sophie's upcoming film Jimpa, which we'll discuss at length, feature characters on complicated journeys of discovery. We'll get into Sophie's own journey too between this and the bonus episode, diving into her unique childhood in Adelaide, how her parents' divorce helped shape her as a storyteller, and finding herself as an artist through intense collaboration. This is going to be an incredibly craft-intensive conversation, but I expect you, like me, will be utterly charmed by Sophie. As for that bonus episode, I hope you stick around for it. Sophie will be back to discuss a seminal piece of art from her life, the 1975 film Rocky Horror Picture Show. Don't forget, you can find links to everything discussed in today's episode, as well as to the 5 a.m. Story Talk newsletter in the show notes. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them for you. And if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and/or review it wherever you're listening to it. It's a great zero-cost way to help me get the show in front of more ears. And now, let me introduce you to the brilliant Sophie Hyde. Welcome, Sophie. It's such a pleasure to meet you. I am such a fan of your work, as I was just telling you, but I'm really grateful that you're here today, and I'm excited to get to know you a bit. How are you?
I'm good, yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. I was just telling you that I've just finished a movie, like finished editing, so I'm a little bit like, oh, I've got to use the bit of my brain where I communicate with people again instead of just, narrowly focus on this sort of myopically driven work that we do. I don't know. Yeah.
Did you lock? You're all done at this point, and now it's a mental release?
Yeah, we are. And truthfully, this one went for ages because we did a cut for Sundance earlier in the year, and then I decided that we had locked really early to get there to Sundance. We'd kind of rushed the process, and I really wanted to do a few small changes. And then, of course, when you open up an edit, a few small changes becomes like, oh, and we could just try this and this and this. So it's a kind of final cut. So we'll go out. We start screening it next week. So it's, as always, it's long and slow, and then suddenly it's really fast, and you show it to the whole world.
This is Jimpa?
Jimpa, yeah.
That's Olivia Coleman, goddess.
Yeah, Olivia Coleman, John Lithgow, and Mason Hyde, who's my child. And a bunch of other great cast too. It's like quite a big ensemble cast, but Olivia kind of leads it and John plays Jimpa, the title role.
My kid went to preschool with Olivia's kid, and every time I passed by her, I just froze. Very few people I freeze in front of, but it was just always painfully awkward in a ridiculously English way.
I guess she has that all the time, but she is so delightful and warm and charming and so easy to be around. But I can understand that.
I look forward to seeing it. Why don't we talk a little bit about your background? You were born in Adelaide in the 70s. What was it like growing up at that time?
Just like I've got these images of like flared jeans and like sunlight or something, do you know, which it kind of was like, like, look, Adelaide is a small place. We were just discussing it's a city. In some places in the world, it would be considered a big city because there's, more than 1 million people here, but it's very spread out and it feels very small, like a town. But the great thing about a place like this is that it has these great arts festivals that were always here. So every 2 years we had the Adelaide Festival of the Arts and then the Adelaide Fringe, which is akin to Edinburgh. And so you just got this injection all the time. There was such a kind of injection of what work was going on in the world, and oftentimes the best of the theatre work in particular and music. So we had this strange thing that maybe has fed into the kind of person I am, which is that you'd get all this incredible input at that time. And then the rest of the time it was really quiet, People were making great things and, whatever. But audiences don't go out much. It's a very quiet sort of city. And it's a kind of mixed city of we had like Don Dunstan. He was like the famously gay premier, And at the same time, it's like deeply conservative. So it's an interesting place, I think, Adelaide. For me, growing up here was, I had a loving family who were very open with me, and my parents were separated, but they were very much sharing the parenting of us, and so I got to do a lot of theatre and make a lot of art, and it's very simple in a way, like taught me to sort of put my head down and create. That's sort of all I ever really did. I mean, I was partied a bit and did all of that stuff, of course.
Were your parents artsy and you inherited that from them, or this was just a natural instinct on your part?
My family kind of is. My parents were both public servants, really. So my dad came up in politics and then worked in health for a long time, and he ran the AIDS Council of Victoria at the peak of the kind of AIDS crisis. So, and that's what some of Jimpa is about, because Jimpa is about our family, essentially. And my mum was a teacher and then mostly in kind of education policy. So no, not artists, but both very kind of drawn to art. And I think my dad had an artist in him somewhere, but he was also driven to sort of service at a time where he needed to be. Yeah, there's this sort of art around in our family, but no one was an artist, do you know? So I feel like very lucky because my parents definitely raised me to just feel like I could do whatever I wanted to do, which is rare, I think. And especially, I think, as somebody raised as a woman, it still is really rare to find that, I think, And so I danced a lot as a kid, and I started doing theatre, and it was in youth theatre companies where I realised I wanted to make things. The process of being with people and creating something, I had endless energy for it. I would spend all my weeknights, all my weekends, all my holidays building work, theatre work at the time. And it's because I really like collaborating with other people, So it was less about the outcome in many ways for me and more about that and the exploration, I think, of ideas that we got to sort of mess around in, And I never really contemplated something else. It wasn't like I wanted to be a filmmaker from a young age, but I never really thought I would do anything other than make theatre or have a group of people working towards something. Yeah. But I didn't call myself a director. I was too nervous of that title for a long time. Yeah. Interestingly.
Why do you think that?
I knew that I wasn't an actor when I was at youth theatre. I was like, oh God, clearly this isn't my thing. They're so amazing, people that can drop into acting in such a strong way. I always felt I was very concerned and very thinking about everything else. So I did do some assistant directing when I was there. I guess it's almost a cliche to say it now, but I think I went to university into film, and like I just didn't see many women. I don't think I consciously went, I don't see women. I just think I didn't feel like I seemed like a director. And when I look back on it, I realized like a director felt like something very particular. But there were enough, there was Jane Campion and there was Gillian Armstrong, and then there was Sophia Coppola. Like there were people, Lynn Ramsey, who did help me with that in some ways. It wasn't like I was looking just to women. It's just somehow it took me longer than it seemed to take other people to say it. I felt like I had to prove it first, I think.
Do you remember when you started describing yourself as a director? At what point in your career you were at?
Well, I'd made a lot of like dance, a lot of short films, a lot of docs, and I was a director on a bunch of those. So I must have been calling myself a director, but I would have still called myself a filmmaker, and I still felt like we were working all together on something. We had a really great collective of people working together. So we kind of divvied up titles sometimes without really feeling like that was as important. I think actually it was only after 52 Tuesdays came out, which obviously I was directing that whole thing and I had to pitch to get it and all of those things. But even then I felt, and I think this is probably a good thing in some ways, I felt like my job was to kind of help lead the ship and help make sure that everyone's ideas were coming in, and we were experimenting when we were making that film. So I didn't think of it so much as like, here I am being a director. It was only sort of later when it got seen and I was like, oh, that's me. I'm the director. I mean, I'm sure everyone around me would say, no, you did call yourself director, but my feeling about it wasn't until after that. Yeah.
If so much of your art is collaboration, do you have anything that is truly just yours that you make without anybody else standing shoulder to shoulder with you?
No, I definitely make everything with others, but that doesn't mean that I haven't had to like dig deep into something about myself. And one thing I've discovered as a creator is that I require time where I am in conversation and making with, and I require time where I turn away and really look inward and spend time with myself and find out what it is that is inside me that is part of the thing I'm trying to tell, and work that out. And it can come out in conversation, but sometimes I need to switch off to everything else. So there's that part. It's not like I then come out and paint some beautiful picture or something. That still is a messy process after that. But I've discovered that I really need that at various points through the process. But yeah, I make nothing on my own. In fact, like as a maker, I'm not very good with my hands. I can't paint. I don't even really take photos. But I love making with other people for sure.
It's a wonderful gift. A lot of other people, such as myself, have to learn how to do that over time. Sounds like the natural instinct you had. Did you come from several children that might have helped with that level of collaboration? Were you used to, from the start, being part of a group?
I have one sister, Alice, who's older than me, and we were close as young people, but then she moved away to live with my dad when I was only about 14 or something. So not so much. It really was coming from the kind of dance theater background, I think, that did it. And also, it sounds like I'm always good at it. Like, for sure, it's not easy to be in relationship with so many people all the time. Like, my favorite part of what I do is the relationships that I form and how close it can all be. And I tend towards being very close with the people I work with, to the point of like, my child is in Jimpa. My partner is my cinematographer and editor. My best friend from growing up co-writes with me. But also the people that I work with become very close and very important people to me. And it's the hardest part of what I do. Like, it's just sometimes it's great. And sometimes you're like, I didn't do that bit well, that collaboration. Or I have, I've thought a lot about this idea of, when you too controlling. And I know that when I'm feeling too controlling, that things aren't going as well. But it does happen. And sometimes I need to shut the door and like control things for a while. So it's like collaboration is a very messy thing, I think, even for someone like me who loves it so much.
I was going to ask about Brian later, but are you comfortable talking about how that collaboration has developed alongside a partnership at home?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it sounds my wife's a screenwriter. We work on projects together. She's been my producer at times. It's taken 20 years to work out how to give and receive notes with each other.
Yeah.
How's it worked for you?
Well, Brian and I started working together before we were together. And I think that's a really crucial thing is we were making films and like stuff for nightclubs and film clips and things like that for a couple of years, at least a year, a bit more, I think, before we got together. So it's like our whole relationship has been that, you know? It's definitely taken some navigation because we just started out just kind of creating together and then we naturally fall into particular parts. Brian's a really great cinematographer and he edits really beautifully, but at times he'll direct as well and at times produce when we kind of all do it together. And so there's been moments where I have felt like, oh, suddenly I'm getting a lot of attention, for instance, over this thing that actually we made hand in hand, side by side. But as a director, one of the things is that your name is at the front of things. And like, that's how our industry works. It's director focused. And so everyone that works so closely with you I get nervous that they feel, you know, something about that. I think mostly everyone's kind of fine with it and understands the industry. But it is odd when you kind of like, you're all in together from the beginning to the end. You live with each other, you do it, you know, you're so kind of part of it. But you also know that, you know, I also think about that as a director, you also take a lot of slack. Like you wear a lot of flack is what I should say, rather than take a lot of slack. You also have to bear the shitty parts in a really intense way and and navigate all those relationships, as I said. And so we separate things more now. I do lots of parts of the writing that Brian isn't part of and financing and Bri is so diligent and fastidious about the process and the editing and things like that I would fall away from much more easily, you know? But I can't imagine our relationship without working together. So I don't know, I guess that says something. And now we have Ord, who's just about to turn 20, and now they work with us as well. So it's, we do have a hard time switching off, let me just say.
I think it's the same problem here as well. You have an idea and you immediately have to talk about it. There's no ability to ever just shut up for a little bit.
Yeah.
Be something else.
Yeah, you just like, could you just be a partner for a second that just listens and I'll be one for you? But no, you can never be that. You're too involved.
So you went to uni in Melbourne and then returned to Adelaide. What was that like in terms of working out who you were as an artist? I know this was also a period that you found many of your current collaborators, or you had previously known them in Adelaide. Perhaps maybe you should just explain that.
Yeah, I went through a thing called, Only Youth Theatre, which became Urban Myth Youth Theatre. So that was a big part of how I grew up and a lot of the people that I still work with. For sure, Matt Cormack, who writes with me, was there, and Kate Box, who's an actor who I work with a lot, she was there. And there is a lot of us that have gone on. And other great, you know, people that I know still, Finnegan Krookemeyer, who's an excellent writer and a playwright and a novelist. And we all came up through this thing. And then I went to university, actually firstly here at Flinders University, and then I moved to Melbourne to go to La Trobe University. But it's the people that were here at Flinders that when I returned, we reconnected and started making shorts and things like that together and formed closer productions eventually. It was kind of a long-winded process to that. But honestly, growing up here, I was like, there's no way I'll live here when I'm older. I will definitely leave. I had the small town thing of like, I'll definitely go elsewhere. I'll live elsewhere and this is my home, but I won't live here. And then as I kind of started to return, I came back to make a film. I had funding from the youth arts organization here to make a film. And I sort of just fell in love with it a little bit. And I just like the thing of putting my head down and working and being somewhere where I can do that. And I really like traveling and I love to get out in the world, but it suits me to be somewhere. And then, of course, I met Brian, we formed a company, we had a child, and then you're just like, you wake up and it's 20 years later and there you are in your very lovely life.
How do you think Adelaide has shown up in your work, if at all? I guess I'm also curious, what was it you fell back or fell in love with? Because I think we all leave home wanting to leave it behind, and there's something magical about falling in love with the place you grew up as an adult.
I think Adelaide features in my life way more than is maybe healthy. People often ask me about this because, 52 Tuesdays has Adelaide. We shot that film every Tuesday for a full year. So we're in Adelaide. We're not sort of showcasing Adelaide, but we spent a year shooting here, which was gorgeous, and you think a lot about a place when you're making a film like that. The other films that I've made have all shot overseas, actually. So I've gone out elsewhere and come back here to edit. But I did make a TV series called Fucking Adelaide. So it really, truly was about Adelaide. Place is really crucial. Yeah, place is it's really important to me. Like, I do feel that this is my home. I feel really connected to the land, really connected to the weather, etc. There is an ease here for sure. And I do love running into people that I haven't seen for 20 years and I know them. It can be a very stifling thing to have that as well. I think it's hard to change, when you are around the same things all the time. For me, I love drama in the work, but I really like my life to feel kind of calm in a way. And so I create that in a lot of ways and that suits me. But yeah, as I said to you before, I've always wanted there to be two of me, one that could go off and be out in the whole world and one that could be here, and then the calmness and potter around in my garden and swim in the ocean. And, so I try and do both. It just feels like sometimes there's two versions of you. And weirdly, COVID really shifted things for me because I was always, since I'd been making, I was always going elsewhere and I had a version of myself in the world, I felt, and a version of myself at home. And I had to, during that time where we stayed home, kind of integrate the two. It's like I'm like Severance. I sound like I'm being in Severance. In some way, I needed to integrate and kind of calm something. And maybe it's an age thing, as we were talking about before. But something happened where it was like, can I be in this place truly, and not be always looking out from it to somewhere else? And that happened in some ways and not in others.
It's all a journey of slow, painful discovery. So you're back in Adelaide working out who you want to be as an artist. Did you have a sense of who you wanted to be? If maybe not director by name, but collaborator, filmmaker. I'm thinking Amy Molloy in Animals, young, she's in her 30s, but your 20s. Who are you trying to be?
Great question. Because you sort of become the person that you have in mind, don't you, in some ways? You sort of slowly go like stupid things. Like, I mean, I genuinely like, swimming in the ocean. I genuinely like drinking my whiskey. I genuinely like sitting in a coffee shop, writing in my book. And that's a huge part of me. There was a time in my life where they would have felt aspirational things in some weird way I don't think I ever named that. But the things that you look for, the desires that you have kind of become the life that you create if you let them, I suppose. Who did I want to be? I mean, the people that I looked up to were like Spike Jonze and Wong Kar-wai and Lynn Ramsey for sure. And like, they were filmmakers, visual artists sometimes. And I think I just was excited by the way that they just got in and like made things and thought about things. And I wasn't looking for that kind of big Hollywood sort of story, I don't think so much, although those have their own kind of romance in them, of course, those artists that I'm talking about. But I wasn't like super art house, like pushed right over, but just like my work, it's sort of somewhere in between those things. Yeah, so those people, I definitely liked the idea of people that it felt like what they were doing was exciting with their team. You know, like that is still part of what drew me to them. And it felt like they were pushing things around in a way that wasn't super naturalistic. This super naturalistic wasn't really naturalistic, which is funny because I'm really drawn to that kind of work when I watch it. But when I make, I do tend towards naturalism a lot more.
Well, so with 52 Tuesdays, you referenced that. I couldn't quite understand what I found online. Did you shoot it sequentially one week after another and more or less work it out as you were going along what the story was going to be?
Yes, we did. We had a series of rules. So we shot every Tuesday for 52 Tuesdays for a full year. And every Tuesday had to be in the film. And it was in order. And we had a kind of story idea, but we scripted as we went. Which sounds like we'd just end the shooting, and then you'd just be like, great, here's the movie. But no, it still took a long, long time in an edit to kind of work out how to piece that together in a way that abided by those rules and still felt like it was satisfying, I suppose. Yeah, so it was a project built on rules.
How do you describe the film to people who haven't seen it?
I haven't described it for a long time, but I think it's the story of a teenager who's watching their mother go through a really big change over a year. And because it's a story that's set and shot every Tuesday, that teenager also changes a great deal over that time. So it's a story of a teenager whose parent transitions to live as a man, whose mother transitions to live as a man. And at the time, like, you know, I, like many people in the world, didn't know a great deal about being transgender, and certainly hadn't seen a lot of stuff that was mask version of transgender, but I was really always drawn to a lot of gender ideas and playfulness, as well as kind of deeper ideas about ourselves. And so it doesn't seem surprising to me that I went into that, but it was a real learning curve. I was interested in change at that time because I was interested in the idea of what happens over a whole year, you know, if you watch it. And I was always interested in queer families because I come from a queer family. So it was, and so does Matt, who was writing it with me. So those things kind of came together. But we did it through this program called Film Lab, and Film Lab is designed to have first-time filmmakers make their first movie without any market attachment, and it's super low budget. The idea is that it's low, that its budget is kind of needs to be low for some reason. There's a kind of necessity, that happens, and you're not trying to make a big film for less. You're trying to come up with an idea that you'd never be able to do at any other time. And so 52 Tuesdays is what came out of that. I often think that I don't imagine how I would have gone into drama filmmaking without a program like that, because I certainly wasn't writing scripts and thinking about how to pitch them to the market at the time.
I'm going to come back to Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, in a moment, because I want to talk more about that. But it is also I guess, structurally inventive film in that it's more or less one location. You're talking about 52 Tuesdays. It is a challenge. Not all of your work is that, but do you enjoy, is that something that stimulates you, I guess, as a director, being challenged at that level?
Yeah, I really like it. I do like some kind of restriction, I think. And I don't like the restriction just to be kind of monetary, I suppose. When they came to me with Good Luck, Leo Grande, the idea of one room and two actors just seemed so exciting. I was like, yes, I really, really want to do that part, Of course, you always then push those things around a little bit and you burst it out a touch. But no, I really love that. And I feel like things can get really rollicking and big, and I'm always looking for layers and in the ideas, I suppose, and in people's experience, so it can kind of grow quite a lot, quite fast. But there is something about those restrictions and those rules that help me to stay really focused, I think. It felt like I got to do a lot in Good Luck to You, because we knew the parameters. We just like really delved really deep into those ideas and what we could do with those 2 actors. Well, 3 actors in the end, as you know.
It's perhaps a poor comparison, but I think that I love all film, international film, everything, but Hollywood has struggled by being limitless, I feel, in the last 25, 30 years, where stories used to be great when there was a horizon that you couldn't go beyond. But what happens to the creative process when nobody says no?
Yeah.
Where does the innovation come when there is no limit?
Yeah, and it's like, it's a weird thing because as artists, you're always looking for this place where you are trusted and people value, and that you can do what you need to do or something. So, but at the same time, these kind of your own imposed limits or something are really enjoyable and really fulfilling. And I've always been drawn to that sort of work. Like you watch those, there's visual artists who did, the Life project where they photograph themselves every day for 20 years and things like that, back before, there was a selfie kind of vibe. And those things are fascinating to me. There is something about that stuff. And, like science fiction's a great example, isn't it? It's like some science fiction is so amazing when it's really refined and limited, And as soon as you can kind of, you're right, go and do anything, you're like, okay.
So, talking about animals, I just referenced that a moment ago. It was released in 2019, and I love this film, especially its dreamy and I think deceptively tense vibe. I think tension really defines so much of the film, and you've referenced some degree of tension in your own identity. The part of you who wants to take off, the part of you who wants to stay at home. Is that part of what attracted you to the project, or was there's some other aspect that spoke much more strongly to you?
I really loved Emma's book, Animals, which is what the film is based on. And the thing that really drew me to the book, I mean, there was this female friendship at the center of it, and I enjoy stories about, big, intense relationships that aren't necessarily romantic or aren't kind of lifelong partner sort of romantic. In all my work, I think that is at the center of them. I was interested in that. The thing that got me about her book was the kind of bodiliness of it. Like, I remember reading it, and it's all about the smells of bodies and the idea of desire and what that feels like. Those things really captivated me in the book, and so I wanted to be able to put them on screen, which is a hard thing to do. And there was certainly a kind of question of whether the film would be more kind of bridesmaidsy, like that it would get more kind of, comic, I suppose, is the term, and kind of like more plot driven in some ways, or plotted. And we sort of decided to steer away from that. So for me, yeah, the multi-identity thing is actually really prevalent there. Like the various people in that, the sort of central character of Laura, who's the sort of writer trying to work out what life she wants, was something that interested me. Does she want the life that her sister has, where she's having a baby and she's in the suburbs? Does she want the life of her fiance, who's an amazing artist and pianist, and offering this whole kind of ambitious life, I suppose, in some way, aspirational, but quite perfectionist? Does she want her best friend's life of like that's still at the party and will be at the party for a long time? Or does she want, there's another character who comes in who's much more kind of free poetry sort of, but, like exploring things. And in the end, she doesn't really want any of those things, I think, but she's sort of dabbling in all of them. And I think that's what I was interested in while we were making it, is that question of, do you have to choose one thing or the other? And I think this is always in the work that I make, is like, how do you find an idea of freedom, like your idea, in a life that you have, in the culture that you are in the society that you live in, but I suppose on your own terms. The characters in my films are never like rebellious. They're never like, I reject culture or I reject this, But they certainly don't necessarily choose just to follow a status quo, And I think they all do that in all of those films. But in a tender little way, right? Like, like we talked about.
Well, bringing it back to Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, I just rewatched it, as I told you, and bawled at the end again. I was telling you about just my reaction to, I suppose I don't want to give away the end, but a film about a character played by Emma Thompson struggling with the question of whether she can have pleasure in her life. Is that a fair description of it?
Yeah, the question of whether she can and should and deserves to have pleasure and whether it's even
Mm.
okay. Yeah.
And working that out over structurally, there's a sort of postscript, but over 3 meetings with a male sex worker, which is just such a amazing relationship. You just used the term romantic with friends. Is this a romantic film in your mind?
Yeah, I have a funny thing where I think, it always sounds really funny, but I do think romance is around in so many parts of our lives, and oftentimes not with what is considered our romantic partners. Like if your friendships can be very romantic, and I I think that Leo Grande is a romantic film. There is a romance between them because they're two people, trying to work something out together and being there for each other, and there's something very romantic about that. It's not old school romance, as in it's important that they end up together or that they love each other, they fall in love. I think it was really important to me that that wasn't the story in this film. But, I'd call it romantic.
It's another film that I think exists in a place of tension between two things, which is the drama and the romantic comedy. You just described Animals as something that could have gone more bridesmaids. Was there a debate with this as well, where you had to work out some pretty heavy stuff? It gets into a version that was more dramatic, perhaps darker, a version that was lighter than even this. I guess I'm curious about how you worked out what is a very, feels like a perfect tone for the intensity and also just being a crowd pleaser at the same time, which is a feat.
It's a tone that was really hard to talk about and describe because, and I
Mm.
often find this, it's like between tones, between ideas, and Good Luck to You was, it needed to be funny, and everyone came into it wanting it to be funny, and I agreed with that. But I never wanted it to be funny in the way that like feels false, like here's a joke. Like, so it was like how to find the way that the funniness, does tell us the uncomfortable stuff, which a lot of great comedy obviously does. That's the beauty of it, I think. But really being true to that. And I guess the character of Leo, who's the sex worker that comes in, it's really important to me that there was a kind of honesty to that character. He's come in, he's playing a role in there, but that he is able to come in and show what I think a lot of really interesting people do, whether they're sex workers or in other fields, of being able to see what someone is going through and offer things to them. And I'm very serious, I think, a very serious person. Leo's a very serious person in some ways. And that seriousness, I wanted that to be in the film, but still be funny. So it was, how to, and not to make fun of that character, which I think we've seen a lot of that kind of work, especially with sex workers, but also anyone who's really very sincere. We want to make fun of them, very quickly. And how do we find this way for that sincerity to feel appealing and light at times, and like it opened something for her, opened an intimacy. And I think that was just the writer that had sent the original version to me, Katie Brand, is very funny and very smart. And the combination of her ideas about it and my ideas about what I wanted to come in about someone's body and the idea of pleasure and that seriousness of that character and the how good he is at what he does, those things coming together really helped, So there was, and also I remember I wrote, so I always do these funny things with my team. So on this, the director, the producer and the writer and Emma, who were all on at the time when I started, I asked them lots of questions, and all of them were just like funny, like everyone was like, it has to be funny. And so I was like, I have to maintain this funniness, and that lightness was always, you talk about restrictions, and the hotel room becomes a restriction, but also that thing of like maintain that you can have this tension underneath, but there is also this lightness of touch, was part of that, I think, and fun for me. Yeah. And then I ended up with two actors, Emma and Daryl, who, like me, are very serious about what they care about and what they do, but also knew the assignment. Like, we're going to have fun with this. We want this to be enjoyable. We want this to be pleasurable. So we could go really far into what we were doing as artists, knowing that part of the performance of it was also light.
You talked earlier about the role of collaboration in all of your work. What is the role of the actor, especially in something like this? I mean, there are only two roles. There is technically a third, as you mentioned, but it's largely a two-role film. What was their role in shaping the final product?
Yeah, for me, the actors, when they come into a project, everything changes with your cast, and I want everything to change at that point. I certainly don't have an idea of a film and then like, God, I wish they would just do the thing I thought. Like, for me, one of the most exciting bits is like, oh, okay, that is a different idea. Or then there were times when I was starting where that would really throw me, or I would feel stressed about that. Like, oh, they don't agree with this, or they have a different take on this, or they're not something. I sort of have grown to really love that bit, that watching a character that you've had in mind for so long on the page actually becomes something slightly different from that is beautiful, thrilling. And it means that it's very electric, and also you kind of have to stay alert to it the whole time, because your film changes as that changes. Like, how it's being read, what's there is very different to the script when that happens, I think. But I do really love that. And Emma and Daryl were like heavenly collaborators in so many ways. Emma was on before I was on the film. And so she had a really distinct, very clear way of understanding that character, much more, I think, than I even did when I stepped into the film. I say than I even did, but than I did. She was so sure of who that woman was. And that was very nice to walk into, because I had more questions about her. And the original script was, I think, let her off the hook a lot, and so we worked a lot at that. Like, I felt that she was too, there wasn't enough challenge to that character for me in the original. And that's, Katie and I worked a lot on that to do that. But she knew her. Emma knew her so well. And then Daryl, when he came in, we sort of readjusted and changed things once we had cast Daryl, because he's just a very excellent, open person. And so we were able to have these conversations and think about how the role might be with him there. And that was great. And also, we shut the door. We just workshopped. We had a week together. We just like went through the script, did things like silly exercises that I had, but also really deeply like connected with each other about difficult things, about sex, bodies, pleasure, our families, all of those things that you can do when you're making work, if it's safe, if it's a safe environment. And also had fun with like physicality, like, we would like roll around the room trying different poses. Well, what would that look like? Would that be funny? Is this silly? Is that, oh, that's actually quite intimate. Okay. There was a lot of moving around the way that we worked together, and they were just like delightful. And again, that was in the middle of COVID. Everything was in lockdown. So we were just together. Everyone else was kind of somewhere else. And it was great. We just went really far into the script. And so it was, and then it was on a set. So it was delightful to shoot, it was lovely. Take me back.
So we were talking about challenges and what each film poses, and you were describing one here. But when I think about single location films, they tend to be thrillers. And I think that's probably because when you try to sell the idea of a single location to somebody, it's how do you keep it interesting? And it's going to be really tense. It's going to be lock or something like this. Lots of cuts to try to keep people around for 85, 90 minutes. This isn't that kind of film. So was there a challenge to keeping things moving and energetic, I guess, with two characters for, I think, 86, 88 minutes, something like that?
I never felt that challenge. I know people talk about that. I was like, I mean, I really love characters, especially when I'm making a film. So I could just watch them and look at them forever. And like people and their faces and their bodies, I'm like, well, light them well, and that's it. I guess there was the challenge of how does it move? You know, how is there enough plotting, like enough turns? How is there enough dialogue, but not too much dialogue? We needed there to be movement. We didn't want it to all be sex, even though it's about sex in so many ways. We actually don't show a huge amount of that on screen, but intimacy and their how do they move around the space? That was a big part of it. Is just working out how to shift their dynamic in terms of the script, but also in terms of the location and the blocking and what they did. And so, you know, there's dance sequence, and they're looking in mirrors and they move around the room, and one goes into the bathroom, and you know, there's all of those things. But I always felt it was a privilege to be able to watch someone for that long, you know, to be able to look at their faces for that long. So, and also I had made this really strange choice, I suppose, if I think back on it, which is that I wanted a lot of it to play out during the day. So I wanted a lot of light. And that's very unusual, I think, for a story that's about A, sex work, B, intimacy in a place, you know. But for me, that was important. It's not all during the day, but a lot of it is. And I think that just helps because you're like, people and light and intimacy feels like there's enough, you know. Of course, there are these things that happen in it, like there are plotting devices, and we roamed around with a lot of things. And at one point it was more dramatic what happened, and it felt like it had been pushed into a place that didn't feel authentic to me. So we pulled it back to sort of where we ended up. And we had a lot of talk about whether orgasms were needed on screen and things like that.
Was it a conscious decision to push? Well, obviously it was a conscious decision, but was it from the start a decision to push sex essentially off screen until much later in the film? Because I try to imagine watching this with more conservative people. It's already, you know, from the very first moments, you don't hide what the film is about. Very quickly you hear sex worker and, you know, Emma Thompson having, you know, potential sex with this hot young man. But it feels like more conservative people are having their hand held a little bit into these more intense emotional and physical conversations and what shows up on screen. I don't know if that's in my head, but it's certainly how I experienced
I think
it.
that's true. Like, I'm somebody that I could watch people be naked on screen really quickly and just be really comfortable with it. Like, it doesn't bother me, but a lot of people it really does. Like, people don't love it, you know? And it's very frank for me. Like, bodies feel very ordinary or something. I'm like, come on, like, get over it. Like, it's not always sexual, do you know? But Katie, the writer, her original script, there was no sex at all. You definitely didn't see a single thing. And in fact, I think she was doing that very consciously, wanting it to be about the ideas of sex and intimacy without showing it. You know, it was much more, it was all dialogue, I believe. But I really felt that there needed to be some sex in it. And also, like, I mean, there's a point, I think it's about halfway, that we start to, like, their bodies become very important, even if they're not sexual at that time. So that was crucial to me, that their bodies started to be at play, you know, physically in there. I enjoyed, the very first act is very similar to the original script the very first version that Katie, I think, ever did. And it stayed that way, apart from the bit outside where Leo comes in. And I enjoyed that it felt like old movies in some sort of way. Do you know, there was this feeling of like, that's all off screen, like, or we'll just talk about it, you know. There was something very playful. I sort of thought that it was nice. like in Animals, we play a little bit with romantic comedy ideas, even though it's not a romantic comedy. And in this, I felt that we were playing with those kind of old romance movies in some way. But then slowly you kind of just let those things slide away, and their bodies and the truth of being a human that's a bit messy and true sort of just comes out. Like, because that's what happens between two people. You're actually sitting opposite someone else with flesh and blood and feelings, not just a brain. So it kind of, I feel like that's what was going on. It's like it was just letting go of all those artifices and all those things. So that by the end, when there's like a little bit of a sex montage, it's like, it's okay then. Like, you know them well. Like it doesn't feel big or scary or, too much, I hope. And I think people have responded that way mostly,
It feels triumphant in my mind. It's very celebratory. But listening to you talk, I now realize in the way that I asked about maintaining sort of energy, moving the story, to some degree, sex might be Chekhov's gun here. You're just the tension is,
Totally.
or Hitchcock's, bomb under the table. It's going to go off sooner or later, and your explosion is really big at the end.
That's so true. It's exactly the tension of like, are we going to see them have sex as well?
Yes.
Is a thing. I mean, intimacy is very tense as well, don't you think? Like, I think that there's, that's always there and between two people, but that's a great thing. It is Chekhov's gun.
Do you want to talk about Jimpa? Is that something you want to get into right now?
I for sure can. Like, yeah, let's.
I'd love to hear your description of it. I know you said it was inspired by your own family. So what am I looking forward to?
Yeah, Jimpa. It's like all of the films, it is not classifiable easily. Like, it's a family story. So it's about a woman, Olivia Coleman plays her, who takes a teenager to Amsterdam to visit her father. And her father is a very eccentric, extravagant gay activist sort of type, played by John Lithgow. And the teenager says they want to stay and live in Amsterdam because they're kind of coming into their own queer identity, I suppose. And they want to stay there with their grandfather and experience that life. And the mother doesn't want them to, but doesn't want to create a kind of conflict or say no to their child. So there's this sort of, again, there's this very small bubbling tension about what will happen to this family. But mostly it's about the idea of parenting and her looking at her relationship with her father, who left her when she was very young, and what kind of parent she wants to be now, and how much she takes on and passes down. And that's complicated by ideas of queerness and legacy around that. So it's a big queer family drama. And there's a big ensemble of beautiful cast that are Dutch as well as Australian. And it's all set in and around Amsterdam.
And your child,
My child, Ord.
so is this partly their story as well?
Yeah, my child, Ord, Ord plays Francis, which is the teenager in the film. And Ord is also, like Francis, trans, non-binary, and came out very young. And so, yeah, my experience with my own father, who was gay, and my own child, who's trans, has been a big part of telling the story. But also Ord's experience, because Ord has grown up while we've been writing the film. They're about to turn 20. The character's 16. So they became a bigger part of the conversation. Like, they came into the writer's room with us a lot. They helped us to adjust and shift that character. It's not their story in that my dad didn't live in Amsterdam. Ord never said I wanted to go and live with him. It's quite a different story from ours, but the characters are really reflective of the people in our lives. Yeah.
It's just such a unique story that we use art to explore ourselves and find understanding, I guess, create mythology about our own lives, even if it's in somebody else's story. But to be able to do that with your child and do that in a film in that collaborative way. I've not heard many people do anything like that.
It's such an extraordinary thing to do, because I already am like, I think of all of the films that I've made as being very personal in their own way, and there's so much of me in them. This one's very explicit about that. It doesn't mean that it's more personal, I would say, but it is very explicit, and it's more personal for the people around me and the people in my life. And that's been so gorgeous to do, and also really challenging to like put all of that out there, because part of the film is about the idea of stories and who tells stories a certain way and who gets to tell the story. And, you know, so Hannah, the character in the film, is making a film. So it's even more meta. And the question of whether the film is the true story or is just a story that she finds helpful is a big part of the film. So it's very sounds so much more meta than the film actually feels, I think. But it is it's really interesting to me to be somebody that has the privilege to be able to create the stories about our lives. And I think we all do that. We do it every day when we retell our own lives, you know, and when we reframe all the narratives over and over, and we do that for good reasons. But when you get to do it and people watch it and see it, and then you're doing it about your own family and you're changing things and stuff, it's very interesting, I should say. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. It sounds amazing. Thank you so much for being here today. We're going to come back in a moment to discuss a seminal piece of art from your life. Care to tease the listeners with what you're going to be talking about?
For sure. It's definitely seminal. It's the Rocky Horror Picture Show that we're going to talk about.
I'm looking forward to it. So I'll see you in a moment, but thank you so far.
Great. Thanks, Cole.
As for the rest of you listening today, wherever you are, thanks so much for spending your time with me here at 5 a.m. Story Talk. Don't go just yet, though. As promised, there's a bonus episode to come. Sophie returns to discuss a seminal artwork from her life, the iconic 1975 film Rocky Horror Picture Show. We go so deep into so many aspects of this film, from its role in Sophie's life and culture in general, to what it had to say 50 years ago about sex and gender freedom, to what about its message we might have forgotten since the film's release. There's a lot of Tim Curry love too. So much Tim Curry love. But to listen to it, you're going to need to become a paid subscriber wherever you're listening to this. Alternatively, you can head to the show notes and subscribe to my 5 a.m. Story Talk Arts newsletter, where you'll get access to all of my podcast episodes early, including every bonus episode like this one. You'll also get access to a ton of other exclusive arts articles, most of them focused on screenwriting and writing. More importantly, your support of 5 a.m. Story Talk will help keep the lights on here and the paid advertisers away. I'd love to keep this podcast free of ads for as long as possible, if not forever. Upcoming guests of 5 a.m. Story Talk include The Edge of 17 writer-director Kelly Freeman Craig, The Black Phone 1 and 2 co-writer and director Scott Derrickson, and digital rights activist Lizzie O'Shea. Next week, I'll be joined by producer Mike Jackson. He founded Get Lifted Film Company with his friends John Legend, yes, that John Legend, and Ty Stiklorius. Thanks again for listening. See you at the bonus episode for some more 5 a.m. Story Talk with filmmaker Sophie Hyde.